Good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I am very excited to welcome you to tonight's conversation with Sarah Sentilles and Sally Field. Sally Field, thank you for attending. FAN is a nonprofit organization that presents a high-quality speaker series offered free to the public on a wide variety of topics, including human development, mental health, education, and social justice, among others. We have over 125 videos of past events archived on our website and our YouTube channel, so please be sure to explore. And now, formal introductions. Sarah Sentilles is a writer, teacher, critical theorist, scholar of religion, and author of many books, including Draw Your Weapons, which won the 2018 PEN Award for Creative Nonfiction. Her new book is Stranger Care, a memoir of loving what isn't ours, a moving account of her and her husband's journey through the foster care system. I want to note today is launch day. It's her first event for today, or for the tour. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the New Yorker, and the Oprah magazine, among other publications. She's had residencies at Hedgebrook and Yaddo, and earned a bachelor's degree at Yale and master's and doctoral degrees at Harvard. Ms. Sentilles is also the co-founder of the Alliance for Idaho, which works to protect the human rights of immigrants by engaging in education, outreach, and advocacy at local, state, and national levels. Sally Field is a two-time Academy Award and three-time Emmy Award-winning actor who has portrayed dozens of iconic roles on both the large and small screens. In 2012, she was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in 2015, she was honored by President Obama with the National Medal of Arts. She has served on the board of directors of Vital Voices since 2002, and also served on the board of the Sundance Institute from 1994 to 2010. Her book, In Pieces, is a New York Times Notable Book of the Year and an intimate memoir about her life and work. It's now my true pleasure to present Sarah Sentilles and Sally Field.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you for inviting me, and Sarah. And Sarah, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this kickoff. I'm just going to start, since I'm an actor and all of that, and talk about myself.
Perfect.
I was given this book in the middle of the pandemic, literally the middle of it. And just to talk, probably more than anyone wants to know, I had had shoulder surgery because I had to have major shoulder surgery. And I couldn't sleep ever. Not only the pandemic, and I was worried about my country and my arm and my body and my life. And someone gave me this book, a mutual, let's say it, a mutual agent of ours, and said, you have to read this book. And I looked at it and it said Stranger Care, a memoir of mothering what isn't ours. And I went, oh no. I don't want to, I can't take any more sadness and stress. And I really, and our friend Molly said, go ahead and read it. And I couldn't read it like normal, like you sit in the day and you read the thing, because I would fall asleep in the day, but I would wake up always at 2:30 in the morning and be awake till maybe 4. And I thought I'd lose my mind. And Sarah kept me company. Mm-hmm. And I wrote her eventually and said I felt she was holding my hand. I did. It is truly an extraordinary, loving, powerful book about mothering, about nurturing, about connection, not just from parent to child, not from a child that isn't yours coming out of the foster care system, but the planet, how trees mother, how birds mother, how the planet mothers, how the communications you don't even know are happening that you take for granted, how they're happening, how when the forest burnt down in certain places, it was the crows that put the scrub oaks back to life because they planted the seeds. With every reading of every night, I felt safer. I felt better. I felt enriched. And I had this journey because every night these owls would come out by my window, and they would talk to each other from the tree right out my window to somewhere in the distance every night. And and it was somehow all connected. That was my journey with this book. And when I reached out to Sarah, and then that's why I'm here to start this launch of this magnificent piece of writing. But now I have to ask Sarah to tell us, and you, all of you out there, and thank you so much for coming and listening. What the heck is this? Tell us the story.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sally, for being here. It's just, I have to pinch myself that I get to be in conversation with you. And I've loved being in conversation before this. You're such a gift. And I just feel so honored to be able to talk with you. And thank you to Lonnie Stonich and to Heidi Stevens at the Chicago Tribune for writing a wonderful piece today. And to Anne Marie Anderson for making this all happen. I'm so honored to be here. And I have to say, Lonnie, this is like the best organized event I've ever been part of. And I'm so grateful for what you do to support books and authors. But yeah, so Stranger Care. I started writing Stranger Care to be a book much more academic about this idea that things are related that we don't think of as related. I was really interested in how trees are related to one another, or thinking about ants that eat, or what allow peonies to bloom. I wanted to write about these relationships that go missing sometimes, that remain invisible to us. And I wrote something like that. And I sent 100 pages of it to our shared friend, Molly. And she wrote back to me, don't send me another page until you get a child in your life, because I was setting out to adopt a child. Eric and I had decided we were going to adopt a child, and we decided we would adopt through the foster care system. So then we started taking these classes where we were trained to become foster parents. And we learned in our first class that Eric and I were what's called non-relative care providers, or stranger care. That's what we were called in the foster care system, stranger care, which is such an alienating term for this very intimate task of parenting, of welcoming someone else's child into your life. So I wanted to explore that. So I started out writing this more intellectual book and ended up writing the most deeply personal book I've ever written.
I have to ask you, and I know I'm not the only one, your decision to parent was a slow one. You describe it so beautifully. I so identified with who you are, in that your decision-making process is slower. You know, it's slower than Eric's, slower than your husband's. And you stew on things, and you wait on things. You're not sure about things. And you get influenced by the people around you, Eric for one, who makes an immediate, strong decision. And so sometimes, wherever your decision is, it might not have floated to the surface yet. It gets waylaid by Eric's, whose decision-making is like, right there, this is what we'll do. And sometimes you find out what you really feel later on. And that's what happened to you, right?
Yes. I always thought that I wanted to be a mother. It's something that I wanted to do, but I was also scared of it. I was scared of what it might do to my writing or my life, or just the way that I moved through the world. I also think of myself as a feminist, as a strong feminist. But it turned out I hadn't really been saying what I wanted in my life. I had been deferring, like you say. I'm slow at making some decisions. I make big decisions pretty quickly and boldly and surprise people, but smaller decisions I tend to defer. I have to journal. I have to meditate. I have to figure things out.
Me too.
And by the time that I was able to admit to myself and then to my partner, Eric, that I wanted to be a mother and that I wanted to have a baby, I realized that I was married to an environmentalist who didn't really want to bring another human being onto the planet. He wanted to help take care of the children that were already here. And Eric wants to live in a world where we tend the earth and we take care of the environment. And I want to live in a world where we take care of each other, where we take care of strangers. So foster care became our common ground. We decided, okay.
If you had in your heart, if you knew you wanted a baby, and this is what you want, it doesn't need to come from your body, is what you've decided. But then why go to the foster care system? Why not, why not go to the right, okay, there's all these places, we'll just adopt and it'll all be, that's the end of that. Why do that?
That's a great question. Why do that? So Eric and I are both academics. We over-research everything, but we did not over-research the foster care system. And But we did know that there's 500,000 children in the foster care system. And we did know that we wanted to be parents. You know, the question originally for me was, do I want to have a baby? And that eventually switched to, do I want to be a parent? And we decided that we would welcome home. We would try to be a home, hopefully a permanent home for one of those 500,000 children. And we did not know what we were getting into. You know, we didn't know that reunification is the primary goal of the foster care system, to reunify children with their biological parents. And what's more, we didn't know how deep and fierce and immediate our connection would be to the child that we welcomed into our home. And we also didn't know what it would feel like, not just to reunify a child, but to put them back in a situation that might not be safe for them.
You know, as I reread the book again and went over things, I know that our task here tonight, or for the whole journey of this book, is not necessarily to bash the foster care system, because it's you know, a difficult system to run. But you can't help but feel that way when you read this, of how idiotic their behavior is. And ultimately, you do get Coco, this little baby that's just a few days old. And after all of this, you were first in Oregon, then you went to Idaho. All of the work you did in Oregon to pass all their tests. I mean, no parent alive, whether it's your own child or somebody else's, could pass these tests, you know. It was, I mean, really maddening. And then you went to Idaho and you had to start all over again. And ultimately you get this child that you fall deeply and instantly in love with, that is your baby. And then this journey begins. This heart of the book, this journey, this personal tale of you and Eric and Coco, and what parenting is, and how it changed you, and ultimately the hoops that you had to continue to jump through to do what their edict is that to try to bring the birth mother up to a place where she can care for this little baby. And I sort of want to read one place that you wrote, but I don't want to take the time to do it. But then again, maybe you wouldn't mind.
I wouldn't mind at all. Please do.
I'll try to read it correctly. Okay, here it is. This is, let me just say this, the way the book, and when Sarah and I had a conversation, because I've been writing all my life, but I've never really been a writer. And yes, I have this book, but I've been writing all my life to do that. I'm so interested in her process and how she crafted it this way. The structure of it is simply so nurturing in itself, in that she doesn't allow us to get too upset before she takes us to some place else. She takes us to the trees. She takes us out to the birds and gives us some nurturing, and then takes us back into the heart of the story. And they're all little pieces, little essays. This is one little essay. It's called Take Off Your Shoes. Months before we brought Coco home, I talked with audience after audience about the Jewish philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. Is that how you pronounce it? Levinas. His family was killed in the Holocaust, and Levinas dedicated his life to developing an ethical system that would make another genocide impossible. This was his proposal. When you are in the presence of the other, a stranger, someone you don't understand, someone who scares you, someone who think might kill you, when you feel the other is so different from you that their life might not even count as a life, then that is a sign you are in the presence of God. The life of the other must be protected at all costs, even at the cost of your own life. This was not easy for me to talk about before Coco, before Evelyn, Coco's mother. This wasn't easy anymore. I thought the stranger, the other I'd been asked to care for, was Coco, but the stranger wasn't Coco. The stranger was Evelyn. Take off your shoes Moses hears a voice say from the burning bush, consuming life as he knew it, "You are standing on holy ground."
Mm.
And that's what you found, that you weren't just caring for Coco, you were caring for Evelyn, Coco's mother, a very young woman who had had another child who was given up to foster care, who was a boy who was very much older and who was caught in the trap of drugs. And I think you and I had talked about this, and I don't want to be the one to do the talking, but I love this book so much, I might talk all the time. You talk so beautifully about trees being connected by their roots. And they're not only connected to their own offspring, but eventually they nurture other plants around through both fungi, and they send off nutrients. And if one of the plants, one of the trees, the foresters will come in and thin the forest, thinking that it gives more light to the existing trees. But in reality, it sends those trees into terrible stress and bereavement. And it is that connection, those roots that constantly reach out to each other. And it made me think that it was what Evelyn never had.
Mm.
It never had a root connection anywhere. No one was going to nurture her. No one was going to reach out to her when she was stressed and bereaved. And then there you have it. There is Evelyn, now in your life, now the real mother. And you had friends around you, especially your therapist, telling you, trying to root you, trying to plant you in the ground,
Mm.
that you were that you were the tree offering shade. You couldn't be the mother bear. It was not your territory.
Mhm.
So tell us about Evelyn, about learning to know her and accept her, and how you had to let all of the part of you that wanted to growl at her and send her away, you had to let that go and see her.
Well, I remember the first time that I met Evelyn. So we had Coco. We picked Coco up from the hospital when she was 3 days old. We got a phone call at 11 a.m. and we were parents by 2 p.m. It's very quick. The foster care system is very quick. And I didn't meet Evelyn until 2 weeks later during the first court date. And we had Coco in a little stroller and we pushed her through the metal detector. And then Evelyn asked if she could hold her daughter. And so here's a woman who's given birth 2 weeks before. Her body still has all the signs of birthing. And I watched her pick up her tiny baby girl. Coco was under 5 pounds, and cradle her to her chest and just start whispering, "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you." And that was this moment where I realized, okay, this is different than what I thought it was. What does it mean to be a foster mother? What does it mean to be in relationship with the biological mother? And I fell madly in love with Coco, and Eric and I wanted to keep her. And that is not how foster care works. Foster care is designed to make sure that Evelyn had the support she needed to be ready to parent Coco again. And I encountered this parts of myself where I didn't want Evelyn to succeed. I wanted her to fail. I didn't want her to do the things that the system wanted her to do, because I wanted to keep her daughter, because I believed I would be a better mother than she could be. And I remember one session I had with my therapist, who basically turned me around 180 degrees. And she said, your life is not worth more than her life. And here's this person who suffered so much. Like you said, she didn't have a root system. We had seen her family tree and seen the kind of generational ripples of poverty and addiction and mental health struggles. And she said, you can't, here's this person who wants to change her life, who wants to be able to welcome her daughter back, and you can't go against that. She said this thing that I'll never forget. She said, someday, even if you get to keep Coco, you'll have to be able to look your daughter in the eyes and say, your mother was beautiful and she loved you and she did everything in her power to try to get well for you. And you'll have to say that you supported her. Otherwise, what are you going to say? What are you going to say to her? And she said, this baby might save this woman's life, and you don't need your life saved. If she gets well and she gets Coco back, will you be sad? Yes. But if you've supported her, you won't be bitter. You'll be in grief, but you'll know that you did the right thing. So that set out the task of trying to learn how to love this person that I had nothing in common with. We had nothing in common. And now all of a sudden we did. We had our shared love for this baby, and it brought us together. And it's one of the most transformational, difficult, beautiful, terrible relationships of my life.
Wow. Wow. So part of me hesitates because in a lot of ways, this book is a thriller. You know, to the end, you're wondering, oh God, what's going to happen? Oh God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? So part of me doesn't want to jump to the end and let everybody know what happens, but it certainly does not reflect well on the foster care system, or at least the foster care system there in Idaho, where, let me just say this, when you and I talked the other day, I had said to you, if you could fix something, we all want the foster care system to be viable, to be a healthy system. When you say there's 500,000 babies, 500,000 children, not necessarily even babies at this point, who are in the system, who might not be with stranger, but they might be with an extended family member, an aunt, a grandmother, something like that. But they're still in the foster care system. And how can we fix it? What can we make it be more viable and be less idiotic? I mean, I have to just say, and they can, come after me if they want. It's idiotic the way they were, how they treated you and Eric and Coco and Evelyn, and ultimately what happened. But you said to me on the phone some things that really I think are right, and say what that is, of what needs to be done.
Well, it's such, like all the systems that we ask to pick up after our other systems that don't work. By the time someone gets into foster care, so many things have failed, and we're asking this very underfunded, under-resourced system to do tremendous healing work that can't really be done. And we're asking people to, it was difficult for me to navigate, and I only was dealing with one child. That a lot of social workers, this is their daily life, and they see the worst that we do to one another. So I can only imagine what it feels like to be that. But one of the things I noticed, one of the things I learned is that when Coco was with us, when she was in foster care, Evelyn had all these supports wrapped around her. She had a social worker, she had access to drug counseling, she had access to rehab, she had someone to help her find housing, she had someone with employment, she had a CASA representative, she had a counselor, a mental health counselor. She had all kinds of resources that were there to support her to get well. And she also had childcare, right? Eric and I were parenting her child. So what's crazy about it is once a child is reunified and the case is closed, all of those supports go away. No more counseling, no more access to rehab, no more access to economic support, job support, housing support, no more social workers, no more CASA representative, it's gone. And Evelyn would be on her own, which meant Coco was on her own. So that seems to me one thing that could shift.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, Evelyn went through all of this. She cleared all those hurdles. She worked hard to do it. And ultimately, almost like oddly, abruptly, she was given back to Evelyn. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Evelyn had showed she had a job, she had a place to live, she had, a thing, she had a daycare place, and almost like abruptly, you had to hand her over, which is just horrifying. And you try to stay in contact, but little by little, as it went on, without Evelyn having any kind of support system to help her strengthen her own roots, it began to collapse again. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, and I said I wouldn't say this, but here I am saying it, because it still just makes me want to spit nails, that when the foster care system felt that Coco was in danger again and took her away, Coco's father came in, real biological father became involved, who doesn't seem like a real savory character. Coco was taken away and given to, instead of the parents, Coco, only people who had parented her since she was born, which is you and Eric, was given to a friend of the social worker who wanted a child. And I just, that just still is mind-boggling to me. That is true, right?
Yeah, when we agreed to be foster parents to Coco, we had been told that Evelyn was a poor prognosis, that that was the word they used, poor prognosis, which is also an alienating term, that there would be no way that she would be able to do what was necessary to get Coco back. And it proceeded that way for several months. They kept telling us that, and basically were telling us that Coco would be ours, that we would be her permanent placement if that became needed. But then it abruptly switched. Like you said, I got a text message from our social worker who had moved the visits from, she had 2 90-minute visits a week, and then 6-hour visits and 12-hour visits. And it was a Wednesday. I'll never forget. I got a text that said they were moving to overnights on Friday night. Of that Friday, 2 days later, my mother was on a plane to come visit Coco, and Eric was out of town. And I texted back and I said, well, first of all, I called and I said, I can't believe you're telling me this by text, but also my mother's on her way to visit, and Eric's out of town. And she said, what does that have to do with anything? Which is another part of the difficulty of the foster care system, which is Eric and I were useful to them, and we were part of the case. We were seen kind of as almost like staff or part of Evelyn's support team. And then once they determined reunification would happen, we became strangers again. We didn't have any access. We weren't allowed to attend court. Once she was reunified, we weren't given any official relationship with her. Everything depended on Evelyn, whether Evelyn wanted us in Coco's life or not. So the day that we reunified, my friends had collected all these books. They built a children's library for Coco. They were like, okay, she can't have you as her parent. She can have these books, stories that will light her way forward. And we brought clothes. We wrote a letter to Evelyn. We gave her gifts. We had asked the social worker to be present, but she wouldn't. So Eric and I met in divinity school. So we kind of created this ritual for basically the worst day in our lives. We had to hand an infant over to someone who loved her, but someone we weren't sure would be able to keep her safe. And then the system completely cut us off. Evelyn stayed in contact with me for some time. She asked me, I was childcare for her. I got to go to Coco's first birthday party, and then she disappeared. She stopped responding to my texts, and she was moved to back and forth between states to try to avoid detection from one state to another. And eventually Coco came back into care. And as soon as we found that out, Eric and I packed up all of our stuff, all of Coco's stuff, and we drove to that other state to get her because she had lived with us longer than she'd lived with anyone. And they refused to place her with us. And instead they placed her with another foster family that were strangers to her.
Oh boy. But that's that. But now you have organized it in such a way that you see her, you Zoom with her.
I do.
Right?
Yes.
Every Thursday.
We Zoom with her every Thursday morning, which is beautiful. We've been doing that for weeks, and it's.
Put your hat on.
Do you want to see one of my hats? Yes. I have a jellyfish hat. I can put that on. We have rabbit hats and frog hats, and we've sent her toys. So we play with the same toys, and we laugh and play, and she knows our names now, and we play hide and seek. And so it's these beautiful, beautiful 30 minutes of joy, and then the screen goes dark, and it's like losing her all over again.
Wow. But before I ask you about what's happening now in your life, I am so in awe of how you structured this book, and it really begins and it is a long letter to Coco, for Coco to read one day. And it's so nurturing, so loving. As I said before, it really nurtured me. When did you know that's what you were doing? You had said that you had written this 100-page of a book, how things are connected that you don't see in your daily life, and yet they are what keep us alive. They're what keep the planet alive, and the birds and the trees, and so much. And how all these animals, whether it's elephants or rhinos or whatever, they need connection with each other, or if it's not them, with somebody. When did you decide that you were going to craft this story of your own personal, deeply personal journey with Coco into this other idea that you had once had that is so beautifully, the information is, I write it down and put it on my wall. I do.
Well, I decided when I start to write a book, once I realize that that's what I'm doing, I try to set an intention for that book that's deeply personal. And it's actually what allows, the words that critics might say to kind of fade away, because I know I am writing the book, and that's my goal that I set out for. And so I wrote this as a love letter to Coco. I wanted to write a book that would mother her when I was no longer allowed to mother her.
Mhm.
And when Coco was with us, we went on walks almost every day. And I live in the mountains in Idaho in a valley. And I would point out, these are the maples, these are the aspens. If you stay here, this will be your park. This is a herd of elk. That's a nighthawk. This is a red-tailed hawk. That's where the mountain lion's prints are. I just tried to show her the natural world, because I believe that we all come from the stars. That's the way we're ultimately related. And if that's true, then you're never far from home, and we're related to everything. So I was trying to say, you belong, you're already home. You belong to me. We belong to each other. No matter where you are, you belong to the moon, to the stars, to the planet. And so I wanted the book to have that kind of medicine in it, to have, once Coco was gone, I then turned to the natural world. It was what supported me in my grief. I literally hiked and hiked and hiked and hiked. With my friend Erin, we would walk and walk and walk and see the wildflowers and the rocks and the soil and the trees. And I felt supported by the earth and by the beings that we share this planet with. And so I wanted to offer that to Coco.
Oh God. There's so many there. You look at all these little post-its I have in here. I wish there's so many that I would like to read about. The story of the hornbill birds, of how they parent, how they join together as parents, and how they nurture these. What a vulnerable thing it is that they do, and that they find a hole that's already there in the trees, and I'm going to say it quickly, and the female, tree, like it was created by another bird or a bear trying to get honey or something. The female goes into this hole, and the male flies back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to bring the proper equipment to make a wall, to wall her in. And she stays in there with the eggs and he brings her food, and she loses all her feathers. She molts, she loses all of her feathers, but saves till the very end the actual feathers that will allow her to fly, just in case this male isn't reliable.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I get that. But, and then when she realizes, no, she's got the right guy, she's got a good guy, and here he is, she loses those feathers to fly away and be safe, so that she stays with these eggs. And he is responsible for taking care of her and them for the duration until they peek their way out and then can get out and fly away. And all of these are so incredibly loving and nurturing as you explain how these various species do this, make it, how do they, live, the robins in your backyard, as you explained, and as you were showing to Coco, those robins, and how the male is the one that takes care of the fledglings when they're out of the nest, but they can't really take care of themselves yet. It's the male doing it. And I just found all of that so important, really important to read right now. in the pandemic, the world where it is, with so much stress and anger at each other, at the others, at all the others,
Mhm.
and how we can't come together somehow, nurture our planet and each other. That's, one of the reasons it felt so important to me. But you have to say, you can't just leave us here as at this time without telling us a little bit of whatever you can about where you are, what else has happened, and how Coco has changed you.
Sure. I think, you're talking about the natural world and the writing I did about the natural world. I think the question of the pandemic is the same question of foster care, which is, are we going to take care of one another? Are we going to live in a way that we take care of the most vulnerable among us? And I think partly in the pandemic, the question is no, we're not. And partly in foster care, it's no, we're not. But I think we can change that answer. And the foster care system gives us a chance to do that, to take care of one of these 500,000 children that are in that system, or more than one, or hundreds. There's foster parents who take care of hundreds of kids. And the natural world shows us what that tending can look like. I love to watch the robins, and it made me think of how I'm not trained to see birds as family. It's fathers teaching their young, the same as elk or mountain lions. And so I found great relief in that, to say, okay, we can tend one another. Or the hornbills that you're talking about, where they're using a hole made from some other animals, and those animals made the home for the hornbill. But our being parents to Coco and then losing her showed Eric and me that we wanted to be forever parents. Whatever indecision we'd had before was out the window. Eric talks about the weekend that Coco became his daughter. It was, of course, the only weekend I went out of town while we had her, and she got croup. And so he was left to care for her, and watching her in pain. And he felt like the whole universe had collapsed, and it was just the two of them. He said that was the day that he became her father, and she became his daughter. And he knew then that he wanted to be a parent again. So we keep our foster care license open and active, because we want to be prepared should Coco need to come home to us. That's what we're still hoping for. We're still fighting for her and wanting her to come home. And we think someday we might be foster parents again. But we also knew that we wanted to adopt a child. And so we worked with an agency in Idaho called A New Beginning. That's an amazing, ethical, nonprofit adoption agency. And just a few weeks ago, we were matched with a birth mother, the most amazing human I maybe have ever met in my life. She's generous and kind and funny and amazing. And she gave birth on the 19th of April, and we are parents to a brand new baby boy who's in the other room with my parents right now, so I can talk to you. And we're just over the moon. And it's an open adoption, and it's exactly that expanded sense of kinship and family that I wrote Stranger Care about. That yes to family, yes to more relationship, yes to bigger, more expansive sense of belonging. And that's what we're getting to practice now.
I'm going to read just one more thing, because you
Please.
mentioned this, and I'm such a horrible reader. I'm a terrible cold reader. I have to work so hard to read something.
I don't believe that.
But this one is called All the Possible Ways. Kinship is not something you are, Elizabeth Friedman writes in her essay, Queer Belongings. Kinship is something you do. It is a practice. It is all the possible ways one human's body can be vulnerable to and dependent on that of another. It is all the possible resources one body can gather to take care of another. And that's what we're talking about. When you say the pandemic, the earth, babies, the kinship, what is really family? You really examine thoroughly, what is family? You talk so beautifully about, in this one little short essay, and I couldn't put them all down. I'd be reading this whole book out loud. Doing. Of these photographs that were taken in the early 1900s, I think it is, of the former slaves, really, or people who were still slaves, and a lot would argue that a lot of them still are. A lot, the people of color are there. We're fighting our way out of this now, but this man who was the photographer was clearly a racist, and made these wonderful people who were, a lot of them filled with scars, and this one man in particular, you take their clothes off, to be taking these horribly revealing photographs, and they're kept at Harvard. And this photographer, all of his work is kept at Harvard. But when you wrote this in the New Yorker, this essay about this photographer, and one of his kin, his great granddaughter, I believe you wrote, contacted you, that was her grandfather, and she had heard stories about him all of her life, and she needed those photographs because that was her family. And she needed her family to come home. And that, I don't know what's happening with that, but certainly Harvard needs to open up to the possibility that these photographs are of people, and these people are family, and that family needs to come home. And the idea that family is so much more than just the people that are around your Thanksgiving table if you're not in a pandemic.
That those photographs, it's interesting that the photographer is Louis Agassiz, and he wanted to use photography he wasn't the photographer, he was the biologist at Harvard, and he wanted to use photography to prove that white people were superior to Black people. And so he went to a plantation in South Carolina and asked this this enslaver to put together some people that he could photograph, and then use those images to prove the inferiority of one group of people to justify another group of people enslaving them. And I'd studied those for my book before this, Draw Your Weapons, and then I'd read this incredible book by Ariella Azoulay called The Civil Contract of Photography. And I'd been really wrestling with whether we have a right to look at people in pain, images of people in pain. And she talked about those images, and she said it was fathers and daughters, excuse me, that were being photographed, fathers who were enslaved and their daughters who were enslaved. And she talked about the fathers having to watch their daughters disrobe and be photographed by white men. And she said, even in that moment of abuse and enslavement, there had to be the knowledge from the people that were having their pictures taken that someday someone would look at those pictures, and that the photographs would capture not their subhumanity, but their humanity and the inhumanity of the people enslaving them. And that the people in those photographs were waiting for us to look at those pictures and to do something about what we saw. So she was highlighting both the family relationships of those photographs, and also that when you look at a picture of a person in pain, you become family with them as well. You're in a contract with them, obligated to do something about what you see. And she has sued Harvard to get those photographs back, and she just lost. They just lost. Harvard won that they can keep the photographs, which is really tragic.
Yes. Well, so many little essays that are so moving of things like that throughout, of pictures of people who are rescuing children from bombed out buildings, and the rescuers, the looks on their faces as they hold those babies they're taking from the bombed out buildings, of so many stories of people that become family in ways to people they never thought they would be. So it throughout, you are moved by it so many times throughout, as I laid in the middle of the night listening to my owls and wondering if my arm would ever get better. They would certainly make me cry, but also somehow, even just right then, as you talked about, when you see a picture of someone in pain, you become family to them, and it so rings true that you are witness to the pain, and somehow you are connected. And that's what I felt throughout this extraordinary book. And as I realize we're getting very close to the time that they're going to interrupt us, I don't know if I calm down and quit opening up new things to talk about. Otherwise, I'll be in the middle of another story because I have so many things I wanted to ask you about it. I wanted to read because but maybe what I have done is made other people want to get this and read for themselves. And even if you read it at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah. It's great nighttime, middle of the night reading. It's great middle of the night reading.
Who would have thunk it?
I remember you were talking about that video of the rubble. I watched the white helmets, which are the rescuers in Syria who go and try to rescue people from buildings that have been bombed into rubble. And I watched one video where there was an infant trapped in one of the buildings, and they dug for hours to try to get to that infant. And I watched the video, and this one rescuer kind of pulls the infant through a hole in these rocks, almost like a birth canal, and then holds the infant and says, it felt like my baby, this baby is stronger than bombs. This baby is stronger than anything, life is stronger than bombs. And the power of the foster care system is that it makes that kind of care for the other possible. Like if you sign up to be a foster parent, which I hope people will do, even though I'm critical and I think it needs much reform, I am pro foster care, I'm pro family, I'm pro child. And I think we need more people to be foster parents. It's the most beautiful experience, the riskiest experience, the most vulnerable experience. But once you become a licensed foster parent, you'll get a phone call, and on the other end will be someone asking you if you can take care of a child in need. It's a very direct way to support the most vulnerable members of your community, and I hope more people will choose to do that.
Wow. Well, I hope so too. I wonder if I would have ever had the courage to do that. I don't know. I so applaud it. I hope that people hearing this will realize that this is something that they should be involved in, and certainly we should be aware of it more, and that we need to, clearly it's what we've been talking about a lot just in the country, that the problems that you were talking about that make the foster care system so vulnerable need to be addressed altogether. Mental health in this country needs to be addressed altogether. Poverty and inequality in that need to be addressed altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So, and certainly, the problems with drug addiction, and that they're not criminalized, but simply there needs to be more access to ways that people can get well, with not being shamed, and get better.
With having ongoing support to real ongoing rehabilitation is so important.
Yeah.
But I sometimes think about the fact that, I wrote this is a memoir about my love for Coco and about my grief and about my love for the world and my hope that we might be able to live in a way that's more just and life-giving for more people. But it's also about my difficulty as a white, overeducated woman with money navigating the foster care system. And so I have to remember that it's not about me, it's about these children. If it's hard for me, it's about the children that are trying to navigate that system, and about their parents who are trying to navigate that system, and how we can make a system that's better supportive and more life-giving for them. Because really that's what it's about.
And when you have your Zoom calls on Thursdays with Coco, who allows that to happen? When I know in the book you talk about Coco's biological father being really harsh and not wanting you involved at all, but him not being a very steady character in any way. So who is allowing you to have this Thursday visit every week?
Well, because we're part of the court case, and I can't talk about it very much, but because we're part of it, we have standing in the court, and we also count as a kinship placement for her because we have an emotional relationship with her, the longest one of her life. And so we requested that we have visits, and the social workers arrange them. And now it's just between us and her current foster family. They arrange it, and they're really kind, and they set her up and to be with us. And it's a very beautiful strange experience. I mean, it's hard to Zoom with a 2.5-year-old, but we do fun things. We play hide and seek and laugh and play, and her language is developing, and it's a huge gift to us to get to see her and see that she's thriving.
Now, I guess this is all very, very new, but are you going to show her? It's Griffin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Son?
Yeah, that's
Are
his
you
name.
going to show her Griffin?
Well, we want to, but we want to make sure we do it properly. So we've been working with Eric and I have been meeting with a child psychologist who specializes in trauma and what children need to make sure that we do it properly.
Wow. Wow. That's wonderful. That would be wonderful to see that happen.
It would.
I see Lonnie's coming back on.
That was an amazing conversation, Sally. I kept thinking, go ahead and just start reading, Sally. Go ahead. I bet you read really well. Go ahead. Go ahead, read, Sally.
Okay, page 1. Because I just have, it's all underlined.
Oh my
I
gosh.
could too. I could, even though I'm such a terrible cold reader, I could.
I doubt you're a terrible cold reader. Somehow I just don't believe that's true.
No. If I work on it, I get better. But it is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book and needs to be read. That's the truth.
Thank you. I have to hold up your book too and say the same thing. You should read Sally's book if you haven't read it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that you held that up. Hold it up one more time so folks can see. One more time. There we go. In pieces. What a beautiful photo too.
Beautiful on the back too.
Yeah. Oh.
Fade in,
Nice.
fade out.
Okay, so we have a couple questions. I want to remind folks that we're going to continue the conversation with Sarah at 8 o'clock tonight. Well, probably about 8:05 by the time we open up the letting folks in from the wait room. You can get access to After Hours by purchasing a copy of Sarah's book through our partner bookseller. We've been putting in links in chat of how to do that. So make sure you do that. We'd love to have you join us, especially on launch day right here and for this very special event. Sally, thank you so much for your service to both Fan and to Sarah. I'm sure
Yes.
what an incredible honor for Sarah to have you as a conversation partner. So
Yeah.
we have a couple questions. So let me put a couple out here. So Susan asks, and let me move my thing over so I'm not reading and doing a profile thing. Here we go. Sarah asks, Susan asks, Sarah, you have written about your own faith journey in the past. I wonder how this experience affected your own faith journey or your understanding of God. After this experience, are there things you wrote in breaking up with God that you'd revise now? Interesting question.
That's a great
Yeah.
question.
I haven't read Breaking Up with God in a long time, so maybe I'm sure there's things that I would revise in that book. I think what all religions share in common is love the stranger, take care of the vulnerable, take care of one another. So if anything, it has affirmed for me that is what we're on this planet to do, to take care of one another. My mentor in graduate school is a theologian named Gordon Kaufman. And he always said, people ask me, do I believe in God? And he always said, that's the wrong question because it's a question we can never answer. But the word God is out there doing all kinds of work. And it's our job to come up with better alternatives and to make sure it's doing justice seeking work. And he also said this other thing that I love, which is that the God in Genesis is a poet and a potter. God makes worlds with words and with clay. And he would say that doesn't tell us very much about God, but it tells us about the writers of those stories, which is that they knew that artists' work is world making. And so I think that use your creativity to make more just worlds are things that this experience has only affirmed for me.
I just want to say, there's a in the book she talks about the difference between she and Eric is how they think about God, and that's who Sarah is. But Eric has on his car probably what I would like to have, because I don't get it, is I don't know. This is the sticker. I don't know, and neither do you.
Yeah, it was militant agnostic. I don't know, and you don't either. And I think that that's also connected to Gordon Kaufman, my mentor, who said the most ethical thing humans can say is, I don't know, I might be wrong. That doesn't mean you can't stake your life on your beliefs, but it does mean you can't kill anybody else over them, which I think is profoundly true.
Okay, I want to, quick question from Karen. She says, how old is Coco at this point? So that's a quick question.
2.5.
Okay, good. There is a question from Jennifer. She is, and she says that her story is heartbreaking. She's eager to read the whole story. She's troubled by how the discussion privileges how you and Eric feel versus Evelyn and her feelings and her rights. How can we talk about this and help the system, make the system better without creating that kind of adversarial dynamic? I wonder if you want to comment on that.
Well, the book is not adversarial towards Evelyn. It's actually a love letter to Coco and a love letter to the love that Evelyn and I shared, not just for the same child, but for each other. And I should say that I've done a lot of things to protect her privacy. That's not her real name. And I've changed identifying details for those reasons, but it's not adversarial. It's actually radically connected.
And as a reader, I'll tell you right now, it very much talks about and tries to empathize and figure out what Evelyn must be going through.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just from Sarah and Eric's point of view and what we get and what we want and why can't we have it at all. It is kind of a lecture on how to let in other visions, other people's lives, and how to let go.
Mm-hmm.
Very much how to let go of your own deepest wants and let go and see somebody else.
I think it is a memoir. So as a genre, it is your first person experience.
Yes.
It is also, I mean, I think it's true that you don't spend, it's not like Evelyn is speaking to the reader. So there's not like, here's Evelyn's chapter and Evelyn's first person voice. No. So to that extent, like, are people getting some backstory on, oh, and then Evelyn was feeling this way and thinking this way? That's not a piece. I think maybe it's a little bit of what Jennifer was trying to get at is what she meant by like, how can it be balanced? But I agree, there's nothing adversarial in the book whatsoever. I concur with what you're saying. I think maybe the hope was from the questions that hoping for some insight into how did she feel about what was happening and what was that piece. So I think maybe that's what is the reaction there.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we had in common, which a little bit gets at that, is when I was grieving Coco, I felt like no one could understand what I was feeling because people would say, well, she was your foster daughter. You always knew she was going to leave. And then I realized, well, Evelyn understood. She lost her daughter to me, and then I lost my daughter to her. So we were completely bound in our grief as well.
Well, here we are at 8 o'clock. Sally, I want to thank you so much for your service. It's been just a delight having you for this hour in Fanland. We hope that you will visit again. Let us know when your book's coming out. You have a red carpet treatment from Fan. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And Sarah, just lovely. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in just a few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally, so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for nursing me through part of the pandemic. Thank you. Everybody should absolutely get it and read it. Thank you, Lonnie. This is a spectacular place. And if I ever do write another book, which I don't know, me 7 years to write the other one. I'm getting pretty old, but but thank you. I would love to be back and have a good conversation, Sarah. Everybody should come on board and listen to everything else you have to say besides buying the book.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Stay safe and thank you so much. And good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night. Bye, Sarah.